You don't always have to put up crazy stats to make a difference on a team. Sometimes life experiences are just as important. Take linebacker Wil Schoonover, for example. He's an Army veteran, and he hardly plays at all for the Mountaineers, but he is making a real difference on this team. He's also an Armed Forces Merit Award finalist, and here is his story.
Well, first of all, Will, let's talk about your journey, I guess, from high school into the Army.
Was a really good football player from Moorefield, West Virginia. I failed 10th grade English my sophomore year. Ended up writing a letter of intent to Glenville State. Went there, everything was great. Actually loved the school. And the clearinghouse kept calling the AD at Glenville. They're like, all these red flags kept coming up. I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, yeah, this 10th grade English class, you're non-qualifier, so you're suspended from this semester. But you would be eligible in the spring. So at that point, I was kind of like very depressed, I would say, kind of discouraged. I couldn't believe that happened to me. Everything, this was supposed to be the high points of my life, and everything just kind of started crumbling. So I stuck it out that semester and didn't know what I was going to do. The coaching staff got fired. There was, new guys were leaving. I thought about transferring. I thought about playing a different sport. But then again, I always wanted to serve my country, very patriotic. So I went to Cumberland, Maryland, and my parents really didn't want me to do this at first. And I just started talking, and I was like, yeah, I want to be infantry. I want to jump out of airplanes. And at that point in time, I'm like, yeah, you can go right now. And at that point in time, I was like, man, this is a big decision for me, So I left Glenville December 14th, packed up all my stuff, and I left for Fort Benning, Georgia, February 14th. So a big transition. Went to Fort Benning, Georgia. Went to basic training down there. Then I went to airborne school, and then I immediately went to Alaska because at that point in time, we were deploying to Afghanistan. I got to Afghanistan right before Christmas of 2017. And I got home like middle of May of 18. And then after that, I just was in the Army. We went to different training areas. Went to Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Went to JRTC, which most guys that are in the Army will know where that's at. 'Cause it's a very cold, rainy place in Louisiana. But I was stationed in Alaska. I guess I didn't mention that. I love Alaska. If I would have the money, could afford that, I would go there in a heartbeat. Then when I got out, so I guess this is where more obstacles in my life occurred. This was summer of 2020. I was like, okay, I'm going to walk on a WVU football. I was contacting Casey Vance, who's from Petersburg. I'm from Moorefield. So, and Reed Williams helped me out. A lot of insider guys I knew. And called the clearinghouse. They're like, yeah, you still can't do this. And I'm like, wow, why can't I go and play football? They're like, well, you took the Division II punishment of sitting out that semester, that fall of Glenville. So I'm like, okay, what am I working with now? So the clearinghouse and then compliance was like, you got to have 48 transferable credits. At this time, I was already enrolled at WVU. Like, you got to have 48 transferable credits, 3 semesters at a non-Power 5 conference school. So I couldn't even go to WVU. If you went to JUCO, you could have a 2.5 GPA and then an associate's degree. And this is like 2 weeks before season. I'm like, well, I can't even get a WVU. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? So I didn't do nothing that fall of 2020. I actually stayed home, worked at Region 7 workforce. So at this point in time, this is actually a pretty cool part of my life. So I got this supervisor job for Region 7 workforce. And I had these kids that was like 14 to 24 years old. And it was a summer program, and it was for 8 weeks. And it was kids that were, maybe had a hard life, truancy, wouldn't go to school, maybe didn't have no guidance, or they were just looking for a first-time working experience. So I had the opportunity to, give these kids career development skills, maybe life skills, and maybe just give them a little hard love, maybe that they needed. So that was cool. Left there. Then I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I still have a couple more semesters. I still got to go to school. And TJ Van Meter at this time was my boss, and his son, both of his sons are great athletes, baseball oriented. And they're like, I know Doug Little down there at Pot State. I'm like, I could do that. I could go back and play baseball.
Had you ever played baseball?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all state. Yeah,
Oh,
catcher.
okay.
Yeah, we were pretty good. So I go there, and I sat behind a really good catcher, Caleb Taylor. But I ended up getting in. We would double headers. I would catch second game, give him a break. But Pot State was great. I made a lot of good friends. The coaching staff program was great. They really helped me, prepare me for my next step, regardless of what it was. So then I leave Pot State, and then I am trying to enroll at WVU, make sure that everything is good to walk on WVU the fall of 2021. So I actually get called from Preston Wages at compliance again, and he's like, "You got one more thing." I'm like, "What?" This was after he already told me that I was cleared and I had 4 years of eligibility. And I'm driving to the beach, and he's like, "Yeah, you don't have a science class." I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, how does this happen? Like, how does this fall through the cracks?" So I had to take a summer class through Pot State. I took a biology class. But that class did not end until like the middle of fall camp. So I had to wait until that class was done. And I actually didn't, I was supposed to start beginning of fall camp. I actually didn't start until first day of school. And then I got to come here, and my life changed once I got here, and a lot of opportunities arose and met a lot of good people. And now I'm here.
So let's go back to high school. I know that you were a state champion wrestler. I know that you rushed for over 5,000 yards. Baseball, obviously.
Baseball, yeah.
So, you just were kind of like an all-around athlete. You also played rugby in the Army.
I did, yeah.
So you have this real love for sports, and obviously you're just a naturally gifted athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that about yourself?
I would. I wouldn't brag about it too much, but maybe to
I'll
myself.
brag for you.
Okay, all right, cool.
Let's talk about your time in Afghanistan. What was that like?
I just tell everyone it's like the Wild Wild West. You don't know what to expect. It's very hard on yourself, your family. It's very hard on your family. Even when, and you don't always have time to talk to them. There'd be times it'd be a week, maybe it'd be a day, and they're kind of just waiting, am I going to hear from him again? Is he going to pick up the phone if I call or if he calls me? But I would say the biggest hardship being deployed like that, it's like, we have, when you're in an environment like that, your camaraderie and your brother, it's very, you're one. You're like, because if you have to be perfect in that sense. Like we try to tell these guys here to be perfect, to not have any errors, no intangibles in your craft or what you do. You just lose a game when you play football if you don't have your craft or if you're not prepared. Someone's dead. Someone's gonna die, and that's probably the worst part. It's like look at someone and be like, I was wrong. It's my fault, or to where. Someone's in a box and the American flag's draped over them, and they go home and maybe you got to write a letter to someone's parents, be like, hey, this is what happened, and I'm sorry. So
did you have any comrades around you die?
No. I mean, we had guys, but not hands on for me that where I was at. But I think the worst thing about going to war is like all these guys. The difficulties they have from like PTSD and like stuff that they encountered afterwards, like all these scars that they have, it's invisible. You don't know what's going on with them. So I think that's, I'm very big on mental health, and that suicide is super bad in the military. It's actually rose from 22 veterans a day to 44. So it's doubled. I don't think they get enough recognition or help. So I think that's something that, us as a society should work on.
What was, if you can or want to talk about it, what was maybe the worst thing that you saw over there, or just something that will stay in your head forever, your head or your heart?
There was a ambulance bombing in Kabul, Afghanistan. and it killed like 100 people, and just seeing those people afterwards, identifying bodies, family members trying to figure that out for themselves. And they're not necessarily for me, but for them, it's like, they look at us for help. We came there to necessarily help them. Obviously they have, insurgents and all these rebels that try to do these, terrorists and stuff. So, yeah, I would say that was probably the worst. Just these people looking at us for help. It's like, what can I do? What can I do for these people? So.
Yeah. I would imagine everything that you've gone through with instances like that. So when you lose a football game, some people are like, oh, it's so awful. And I get that. People are passionate, but it's not life or death. You've seen life or death. It's a game. And I wonder, are you able to kind of keep that in perspective for some of your teammates or even people outside this building? Or do you just not even kind of go there?
I try at least give them the mature approach to it. I would say most of this team looks to me more as a coach, probably as a player, or as a teammate. I mean, obviously that they still do that, but and maybe just give them a different perspective on life. Maybe something I can give them on a previous experience. Maybe the military structure that I was through. But no, at the end of the day, regardless we win or lose, I'm always thinking it's just a game. This is going to go on. If you go on and play somewhere else or a higher level at the NFL, these games aren't, they're not going to matter,
Right.
So I just kind of keep it simple, don't let anything crazy catch my eye.
Yeah, for sure. So you are a finalist for the 2022 Armed Forces Merit Award. What does that mean to you personally?
I think I'm optimistic about it. There's a part of me it's like, man, this is great. I'm competitive. I'm love to play sports, and anything I do, I want to be competitive at, right? So I obviously want to win. But then there's another part of me it's like, I don't necessarily want this attention. If I could give anyone attention, it would be guys that did die for this country, gloriously. Or to where we talk about mental health, it's like, it's really bad for the military, and it's starting to peak here in athletics, and that's sad. What can we do as, a culture of athletics to stop this? I think that's a big part. But it is. But, with back to the award, I am honored to represent myself, and guys that I served with, because there's a lot of people that I served with that call me like, man, you're doing good. I'm so proud of you, and that's my drive, that keeps me going. And then to represent WVU, as a kid growing up here, that even though I don't play, I can at least do something off the field to represent them well.
And I should mention that the Merit Award is given to an individual with military background who does play college football. So, if you win, then you will be able to use that platform to further advance, your causes, which is a wonderful thing. You grew up in West Virginia. You played in the Towson game, correct? That was your first game?
Yes. Yeah.
What was that like for you after everything that you've been through? You grew up in this state. You love West Virginia. You love this country. You love WVU. To go out there and play and represent everything that you represent, what was that like?
Speechless. I couldn't, I can't describe it. It felt great. It's like all these ups and downs, all these obstacles I had to go over. It's like, finally I got to do this, because as a kid, I watched West Virginia football as long as I can remember, and when they used to run out of the tunnel instead of the weight room, I was like, man, I just want to run out of that tunnel one time. That's it. I got to carry the flag out last year, and playing against Towson, it's like almost like a relief, because like a lot of build up, frustration. So it was good. It was really good.
You are just a jack of all trades. I didn't even mention yet that you have amateur MMA experience. What is that? How'd you get involved with that?
If you know my father, he is in love with wrestling. My dad, He was my wrestling coach. He started the youth wrestling team in Moorfield. So he had me wrestling before I was probably in diapers, not competitively, but just between him and I. So I wrestled all through middle school, high school. Thought about wrestling in college. But once I got in the Army, it's like, well, I got off work at usually 5 o'clock if we weren't training or doing anything crazy overnight. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I can only go to the gym. I can go to the gym, but I kind of get bored with life at sometimes. Like I got to try something new or something hard, challenging. So I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There was maybe a dozen guys we would train with on posts. And these guys like, man, like, you're pretty good. Like, maybe you should start fighting. So then I started putting on the gloves. And really, at that point in time, I've only been in 1 or 2 fights before. Not for any good reasons. So I started training, started learning how to use my hands and dip and dive and bob and weave and do all these things. I just kind of toyed around with it. That was kind of more of my winter thing in Alaska. And then in the summer, I'd play rugby. So I'd just kind of make that like a season transition. Keep me in shape, something to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. All those skills can be put towards football as well. What was the coolest thing that you did in the Army? Did you said infantry and paratrooping? Is that correct?
Yeah, jumping out of airplanes, definitely. I would say jumping a night jump into Geronimo drop zone. Usually, obviously, in Alaska, it's a lot of snow. So, like, the landing would be pretty soft. But I actually ended up getting into the reconnaissance and sniper platoon my last year in the Army. And that was the coolest stuff that I got to do. I'll give a shout out to Sergeant First Class Wirtz. He was my platoon sergeant. And he had us, just squared away. He knew a lot. He ended up being an RSLIC instructor, which is a reconnaissance and sniper instructor down in Fort Benning. And we just had fun. He trained us hard. And we got after it, but being able to sneak up on someone and not be seen or heard or not even know that you're there. This is all in training environments when we was back home. That was cool. How to camouflage yourself, and then there's this thing called TAC chat to where if you're observing in an area, you can have a computer and you have an antenna that goes up and you'll throw a cord over a tree pointing towards your headquarters. So that signal will go up off the atmosphere and come down and get it. And you don't have no Wi-Fi, you have no internet connection. So I thought that was cool. And yeah, that's about it.
Well, is a return to the military in your future?
No, but working for them is, I guess I would say if something terribly, World War III would break out, I know I would be on a list that would be called. But I wouldn't say it's not a thought. But I'm going to school for coaching performance science. I want to be a strength coach. I work here with Coach Mike Joseph and Caitlin Sweeney and Tanner Kolb over at the Olympic side. Great mentors for this craft, and I love to work out and to put the human body to its peak. What can you do to the human body? And I think that's good. And I think the military has a good physical fitness program, but I always want to increase, have my part, and give back to them. I think that would be a good part for me.
One final question. Everything you've been through, all the ups and downs, would you change anything?
No. I felt like at the beginning of I wouldn't say the beginning of life, but when everything, all this frustration and all these different things happened to me, it's I always ask God, I was like, why is this happening to me? And I didn't realize until recently, it's this was all meant to happen. It's kind of like thrown to the wolves at the beginning. This is this happened to you. This is real life. And I grew up really fast when I went to the Army. I grew up really fast and kind of had a better perspective on life, and life ain't fair. Life ain't fair, and it ain't never going to get easier. So I just think, if it ain't going to get easy now, why give up? It's never going to get easier. Just keep pushing, doing your thing. And, eventually something good's going to happen, and it did. Something good came out of my life. Well, with what happened, with my past. So it's like, keep pushing through. Keep doing you.
That's a good message. Well, good luck on the Armed Forces Merit Award. We're rooting for you, and just thank you for your service, Wil.
Yeah.
Like, you're a phenomenal athlete, but more so a phenomenal American, and we need more of you. And I appreciate everything. I appreciate your causes that you're supporting, and just thank you from all of us.
Thank you, Amanda.
All right. Wil Schoonover, thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome.